Hi guys, good evening. Welcome to this session on grammar and sentence correction with Bullseye. My name is Miti. So before we start, a little bit of disclaimer about this session. So for all of the exams that you will be appearing for, whether it's CLAT, IILET, IPM, Indraprastha University, SET Law, SET General, grammar plays a very huge role in terms of number of questions and the weightage given in the verbal section. It also does a good ground laying work for other question types like sentence correction, spotting the error, fill in the blanks, and so on. So let's start with the session. Okay, so I have divided the lecture into two halves. The first half we will be covering grammar, and in the second half we will be covering sentence correction. So I'll give you guys a little bit of break after we cover a certain topic, or in like 15-20 minutes, to gauge and go through everything that we have just learned. And if you guys have any questions, we'll discuss it in that 2 to 3 minutes break. Okay, so today's agenda on grammar is that first we'll be discussing the parts of speech, how to identify and use them, how to spot the errors and correct them. Then we'll move on to confusing words and quantifiers and articles later on. The questions we'll be practicing after covering every single topic or concept, and even at the end of covering the whole section of grammar. Moving on to the parts of speech, let's quickly revise everything that we have learned from class 1st to class 9th. I hope we all remember that the first chapter of our English language books from all these years in school has been parts of speech. So, noun, the name of a person, place, animal or thing. Pronoun, what we use to replace noun or to be used in places of noun. Verb defines an action. An adverb defines a verb, an adjective or another verb. Prepositions are used to define a direction, location, state, direction. Conjunctions are used to connect two parts of speech or any two clauses. And lastly, interjections are used to tell us about a certain kind of sudden emotion. We will be discussing all these in detail henceforth, but let us first apply it in a sentence. The sentence here says, I ran fast but missed the blue line bus to school. Let us look at the sentence and identify the parts of speech. I here is a pronoun, right? So if here I would have said, Ram ran fast but missed the blue line bus to school, Ram would have been the noun here, but instead of that I used I, which is pronoun. Ran here becomes the verb. Fast is describing the quality of how the person or how I ran, so it becomes an adverb. But it is connecting two parts of the statement. The first half, the subject of how I ran, and the second half, that the fact that I missed the blue line bus, makes it a conjunction. Moving on, the is an article. We'll talk in detail later half in the session of how and why we don't consider articles as part of speech. I hope the basic concept behind the parts of speech is known to all of us. Parts of speech are called as parts of speech because they are comprehensively used in making a coherent statement. So if I say sun and the sun, the only change that it makes is of specificity. Okay, coming back to the question. Missed again would be, I'm waiting for your answer for the rest half of the statement. Please tell me what would be missed. Blue line, bus, to and school. Okay guys, I'm waiting for your responses. Please tell me what would these words be as individual parts of speech contributing to this sentence. Great. So missed here again would be a verb. Bus is a noun. School is again a noun. The quality of the bus is the fact that it's blue line, so it makes it adjective, as we just talked about it, right? The words that tell us about the quality of a noun or a pronoun are adjectives. The here we just talked about is an article, and noun again a school. To becomes a preposition. Let's move on. So the types of noun, we've all heard about the 5 types of noun. Let's quickly revise them or learn about them for those of you who don't remember or are unable to recall them. Proper noun, common noun, abstract noun, material noun and collective noun. Now what are these? So if I say that we just talked about that noun is the name of a person, place, animal or thing. So if I say the person is Ram, the place is London, and the animal I say is the white tiger. This becomes a proper noun because I'm giving a specification to the person, place, animal or thing, right? But instead of using these names, I say that for the guy I use the word he, for the place I use city, and for the animal I use the word like a wild animal. It makes it general and common. Now we don't know the specific name, but we have a generalization, so that becomes a common noun. Coming to abstract nouns talk about emotions. But then you would be confused and you would ask me कि भाई interjections also tell us about emotions. What is the difference between abstract noun and interjections? So abstract nouns tell us about normal emotions, fear, happiness, sadness, but interjections tell us about sudden emotions. Also, interjections come with our favorite texting punctuation. What's our favorite texting punctuation? Yes, the exclamatory mark. So interjections like alas, hooray, oh, etc. Whereas abstract nouns, the emotions would be fear, happiness, melancholy. Okay, coming to material noun. So any material, wood, silk, cotton, anything that leads to formation of objects. Collective noun talk about things in groups, right? For like a herd of sheep, a pack of cards, a bunch of keys. So that's collective noun. For collective noun, we have a little bit of rule here that you guys need to remember. So collective nouns can be treated either as singular or as plural depending on the context. Let us take a small example for this. The army are wearing their new uniform. The army is fighting its battle bravely. So you see here in both these examples, the collective noun is army. But depending on the context, we have changed are and is. Why have we changed the context? There is plural. So that's why we've used are, and its is singular. So because of that being singular, we have used is. I hope the concept is clear to everybody. I am reiterating, collective noun can be used either as singular or as plural depending on the context. We will be practicing further on in the slides a couple of questions on the same concept. So someone just asked me an example of abstract noun. Okay, we were just talking about the abstract noun, the fact that there's a difference between abstract nouns and interjection. So abstract nouns also tell us about emotions, but interjections talk about sudden emotions. So if I say, oh, I missed the bus today, so there is an element of surprise there. That's why we add an exclamation mark there, right? But like normal emotions, fear, sadness, melancholy, which has no element of surprise or suddenness related to it, that becomes an abstract noun. Moving ahead, as I just said, we are going to apply a couple of examples here, but I think we missed something. Let's go back. Sorry, my bad. So there is another whole category of nouns, something that we don't usually refer to in books, that is on the basis of their nature of singularity and being plural. So there are certain nouns that are always singular, certain of them are always plural, some of them seem singular but are actually plural, and some of them seem plural but are actually singular. Okay, why do we have certain characterization like these? Let's take a few examples. आप सबके घर पे electricity आती है? I don't think so. We all have electricity running in wires. Music का शौक रखते हैं? नहीं, we all love music, right? So always singular, we would have examples like electricity, music, certain things that are always plural. Do we say pass me scissor? No, scissors. Pants, jeans, tongs. Yeah, there's a reason why they are always plural, because again, by the logic, scissors and tongs, they have two arms. Pants and jeans, trousers, they have two legs. So these are the words that are always plural. Then there are certain words that seem singular but are actually plural. So Let's check out a few examples of these. The ones that seem singular but are actually plural: men, women, children, people. These words are not to be confused because even though they do not have a s at the end of them, they are still plural. Moving on, there are certain words that seem plural but are actually singular. Let's take a few examples to understand them better. Mathematics, physics. Name of diseases: diabetes, measles. They all have an s at the end of it, but that does not make it plural. They will still be treated as singular. I think this concept is clear to all of you. Great. So I'm getting all of your replies. Let us practice a few questions on what we just learned, like the concept of noun, their types, and on their singular and plural nature. I'm going to do the first 2 questions for you, and then I'm going to wait for your replies for the next 4 questions. So we just learned that subjects are always treated as singular. So mathematics is an important subject, not are. It's a singular subject. It's a single subject. These/this cattle belong to Mr. Smith. Cattle again is treated as plural, so it should be these and not this. Let's move on to the third question. What do you guys think? Will it be many people were/was in the street? Were. Great, great. All of you are correct. Shraddha, Khushi, Zeenat, Robinpreet, Aditya, Saloni, Surbhi, Vanshika. Great. All of you are correct about this one. Moving on to the next one. This is a slightly tricky one. So I'm going to tell you the concept about it. Even though when we hear it first, we might think that foot and feet might both fit in. Okay, a little bit of disclaimer here. Since school, whenever we've been doing our English language questions or in the examination paper, we always, the first thought that comes to our mind is, sunne mein theek lag raha hai ki nahi? And most of the time it works. But for competitive examination, here is a tiny disclaimer. You want not to go by the gut feeling, but mostly you want to go by the logic and the knowledge of the subject or of the concept. So if you hear it for the first time, you will think that it was, whether you say it was a 15-foot room or a feet room, it would actually fit in here. But the concept here goes, it should be foot and not feet. Why? Because of the article. A denotes singularity, and we know foot is treated as singular and feet is treated as plural. If a was not here, then it could have been either, but just by the fact that there is a, we want to treat it as singular and put the word foot here and not feet. Great, yes, all of you are correct about it. Moving on to the next example. The great thing is to go looking for either wood or woods. The correct answer here should be, yep, it is wood. Okay, so the difference here is wood means lakdi, right? And woods mean the jungle. So just by the addition of an S, the meaning changes here. Moving on to the last question, the contractor decided to construct a 40 house or houses. Waiting for your answer. Apply the same concept that we used in question number 4. Great, yes, all of you are correct. It should be house. Why? Because of a. You see here another article adding a singularity to this line. Okay, moving on to the next part of speech. We discussed in the very beginning of the slides that verbs denote an action. Let's practice a couple of questions here. You will see a to, sometimes there is even a be plus verb or a to plus verb given. This denotes that you have to fill in the blank with the form of the verb. So it could be either in present tense, past tense, in the continuous tense, depending on what the sentence is trying to say. This is what the be and to are for. They tell you the form of the verb to be used. Let us practice the first question. Today, Lily. Great. You're right, Shraddha. You're right, Zeenat. It could be either waited or was waiting. If you've picked either of the option, you guys are right. Because as you see, the context here is today. So agar wo aaj wait kar rahi thi, so it either has to be in the past tense or in the past continuous tense. Future wouldn't fit in here. Moving on to the next example, by the next week. I hope you see the context clearly. It's talking about the next week, so something that is yet to happen. It's talking about the future. So what do you guys think could fit in the blank here? Yes, will have. Perfect. Moving on, I hope this concept is pretty clear. It's very simple, just the forms of verb. Moving on to one singular type of verb that I would like to bring your attention to is the modal verbs. What do modal verbs do? Modal verbs add a certain kind of element or quality or a certain kind of description to the actual verbs. Now there are 5 forms of the modal verb. These can be used as their forms as well. May or might. Can be used with could, will with would, shall with should. Ought remains as it is. Right? So what is the difference between may and can? So may denotes permission or request and can denotes ability. So if I have to ask you that, may I take your pen? I'll say may. I will not say can I take your pen. Obviously, I have 2 hands, I can snatch the pen away, but that's not what we want to do. We are requesting for the pen, right? So we'll say, may I borrow this pen? And can you climb up the ladder? I'm asking if you have the ability, can you climb up the ladder too? Okay, moving on, the difference between will and shall. Will denotes surety. I will do my homework today, which means I'm 100% sure that I will be doing my homework today. Shall denotes a possibility. Maybe, maybe not. Right? I shall do my homework today, which means there's a chance, 50-50% chance. Ought talks about obligation. You ought to do this, which means you must do this, you're obliged to do this. Wrapping on verbs, we'll move on to adjectives. Adjectives tell us about a quality of noun or pronoun, as written here. So suggestion here is a noun. And how is the suggestion? It's a good one. It could be a bad one too, but then the quality of the suggestion is good. Hence, good becomes our adjective. Again, adjective, because it's a quality, it has 3 forms and it can be compared. The first one is positive, the next is comparative, the third is superlative. Okay, I think some of you are having a problem with the last slide where you guys could not gauge the difference between may and can. Do you guys want me to repeat it again? Cool. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll quickly complete adjectives and then I'll come back and revise the difference between the modal verbs. Okay, so let's complete with whatever we are going on for now and then move back to it. So yeah, as I was saying, the difference between the 3 degrees of comparison, these are called as the degrees of comparison of adjectives. Okay, so how do you identify them? The positive degree does not mean we'll be using only positive words. When I say positive degree, it means there's only going to be one entity. Ram is a good boy. This is a good suggestion. So there is one entity. I was talking about a singular boy, I was talking about a singular suggestion. It could be positive or negative, anything. This just means that I'm talking about one single entity. When I say comparative, comparative is always between 2 of A and B, comma, B is the better. So it's always between 2. How do you identify the comparative degree? It ends with an ER or it has the word more, and for comparison, than. How do you identify superlative? Superlative is either one versus all or extreme. In simple words, sarvashresht. And for identification of superlative, you either find est at the end or most and a than. Great. Let us practice. So, hot, hotter, hottest. You see that there is an ER at the end of hot and an EST at the end of superlative. Similarly with intelligent, more intelligent, most intelligent, more and most. Okay, here's the key. You do not use both ER and more in a singular verb. I will never say she is the most beautifulest of all. No, you either use the ER form or you use more, and similarly for superlative you either use the EST form or you use the word most. Another example to add on, little, less and least. Yes Shraddha, more bad would be wrong. You would that is probably not, yes, that's incorrect. But yeah, the other example that you gave, worse and worst, that is the correct one. Again, we are moving to adverbs, but as I promised, before moving on to adverbs, let me clear your doubt over the modal verbs. Great. So as I said, modal verbs add an other quality, or they describe your verb by adding another factor to it. Let's see how they are different. May talks about permission or request. A very simple example. Remember how when we were in school we used to ask our teachers, "Ma'am, may I go to the washroom?" Right? We never said, "Can I go to the washroom?" Obviously, you have 2 legs. We can all walk to the washroom. So can denotes ability. Again, as I gave the example, if I had to ask you for this pen, I will say, "May I borrow this pen?" I will not say, "Can I borrow this pen?" But if I have to ask someone that, "Do you have the capability to climb up this ladder?" then I will say, "Can you climb up this ladder?" I hope this is clear to all, the difference between may and can. Cool. Let's move on to the next example, will and shall. So will tells us about surety. If I'm sure of something, I'll say, "I will do my homework today," which means I'm 100% sure कि भाई आज तो homework करना ही करना है, which never happened in my case. But okay, moving on. Shall tells us about a possibility, कि भाई कोई चीज़ possible है कि नहीं है. So maybe, maybe not. I shall do my homework today, which means maybe I'll do it, maybe I'll not do it, which means again there's a possibility of both positive and negative. Ought tells us an obligation. So you ought to help her, which means you must help her, you are obliged to help her. I hope now everybody is clear with the modal verbs and their differences. Okay, in the example Jobanpreet that you've just given, that will you come to my house, that is where I'm asking a question. I'm not talking about a possibility, but I'm talking about a question. Will you come to my house? That simply translates into क्या तुम मेरे घर आओगे? Okay, so the lily example. Let's look at if there's a lily example. Okay, Jobanpreet, I'm unable to locate your example. Could you please copy it again? No, not necessarily. Will not always denote possibility. As you see, will always also talks about future tense, right? When you want to talk about a future tense, you also use will. I hope your doubt is clear now, Shraddha. Great. Let's move on to adverbs. So as we talked about, that adverbs tell us about the quality of a verb, an adjective and an adverb. Let us look at a very simple example of how adjective and adverb, because up till now we have only learned that adverbs tell us the quality of verbs. Then we will all be confused, we must all be confused right now, that how come adjectives and adverbs come into the picture. If I say very sweet mango and at the same time I say very fast running, let's quickly try and spot the parts of speeches here. So mango here is a noun, running is a verb, sweet, because it's telling the quality of a noun, should be an adjective, and fast, it is telling us the quality of a verb, so it becomes an adverb. Very in both the cases will be an adverb. Why so? Because sweet is the quality of mango and very is the quality of sweet. Very is not the quality of mango. Very is the quality of sweet. And similarly in the other example, very is the quality of fast and not the quality of running. So we see here how an adjective defines a noun, an adverb defines a verb, an adverb on the other hand also defines an adjective and an other adverb. I hope this example is clear to all of you. Moving on, he worked the sum quickly. So, quickly defines what? Yes, Aditya, the first question, the first example. Yes, you're right, quickly defines the pace, how he worked, right? So, worked being a verb here and quickly being the quality of worked. Moving on, the flower is very beautiful. Now, beautiful is the quality of the flower and very is the quality of beautiful. So, beautiful is an adjective and very becomes an adverb, and we see how an adverb defines an adjective also. She pronounced the word quite correctly. Applying the same principle here, quite correctly becomes an adverb. Quickly summing all of this, let's revise it. So we have learned how adjectives define or tell us the quality of nouns or pronouns, and for the rest of it, for rest of everything, whether it's adjectives, verbs or adverbs, सबकी quality adverbs ही बताते हैं. Okay, so Hina wants me to explain the last example. Pronounced. Pronounced is the verb here, right? So pronounced की quality क्या है? Correctly. और correctly की quality क्या है? Quiet. So making quiet the adverb here. Let us practice a few questions here. So some of these questions are correct, some of them may be wrong, may not be wrong, but I'm not going to disclose the answers right now. I am going to give you guys, let's say 1.5 to 2 minutes to just go through these, pen down your answers, and then we're going to discuss it in another minute. Students, please keep patience. Right after the slide, we are going to take a 2 to 3 minutes break in which I'm going to discuss all your queries. Okay, I see some of you telling me that you guys are done. Wow, you guys are really quick. Great. Let's discuss the answers. So, the first question says he decided to work slow and easy. So, we are talking about the quality here. Remember, we have to tell the quality of work here. So, the correct answer should be slowly and easily with an ly, and again easily with an ly. Again, even though the second sentence might sound correct to you, there's a tiny error here. Again, the error of adverb versus adjective. He played well, because we are trying to tell the quality of played. Played is a verb and well is an adverb, whereas good is an adjective. Students, always remember, when there is a certain concept that you are unable to gauge, always put it in a smaller example. Looking at this example itself, एक छोटा सा और example देखते हैं. You say he's a good boy. You never say he's a well boy. So good boy, when I say good boy, boy is the noun and the quality of the noun is the fact that he is good, right? So good becomes an adjective. Moving on to the third example. The younger child plays piano more better. We just learned this concept that both the ER form and more will not come together. So the younger child plays piano better than her elder sister. This should be the correct form, removing more from the statement. Yes, you guys are right. Moving on to the last example, the banker made the more difficult decision in the bank's history. So remember how we talked about that the superlative degree always talks about extremity. So it wouldn't be more, it should be most. Great. Moving on, as I just said, after this slide we are going to take a tiny 2 to 3 minutes break where I'm going to give you time to gauge all the examples that we have just learned and tell me whatever the doubts you have. So I'm waiting for your doubts. Let me know whatever doubts you have and we're going to discuss it. Shraddha, it can be slowly and steadily, but the problem is that we try and make the minimum changes. So the word steady is not here, the word easy is here. So we don't want it to be modified to steady. Okay, Aditya, there's not much of a difference between she is good or she is good. How? Because when I say apostrophe S, one of the apostrophe S's mean, if I say, let's say girls, the girls book, it means singular plus specific. I'm talking about a specific girl and her book, right? But sometimes the apostrophe S is also an elaboration of, as you said, she plus is, right? So apostrophe S denotes singular plus specific. That's the only difference. Okay, some of you are asking me to repeat the first example. Let's look at it. As I said, whenever you are unable to understand a question, always decrease the magnitude and put it into a simpler example that we use on a day-to-day basis. See, the difference here is when I say slow, it's just the word matlab, even if you say slow or slowly, the translation to the word is only dheere. But if you look at it this perspective, that you are adding to the quality of the work done. Now something's quality is not happy. The quality would be happily. The difference being happy matlab khush, Happily मतलब खुशी से, मतलब possessing happiness with a certain attribute. That's the reason why it should be slowly and easily. I hope the difference is clear now. I'm not explaining it to you by a certain kind of rule. I'm explaining it to you by a basic logic. Khushi, we'll come back to the differences between pronoun. That's the next thing on our agenda. Okay, Ayush, good innings. Innings is a noun. That is why you can say good innings. Innings is not a verb. Innings is a noun. So you can say that good innings. But if I say that the batsman played well, so well defines played. Yes, Surbhi, all the words ending with ly tell a certain attribute. Happily, cheerfully. Ayush, I hope that your doubt is clear now. Okay, so among and amongst. Okay, let me put it into a smaller perspective for among and amongst. तुम लोग को फिर खुद ही समझ में आ जाएगा. Let's see. Especially and specially. Is there a difference in context? No. Why? Both of them are trying to say about a specific word or trying to lay stress. But when we speak, we put an E in the middle, an E in the starting because we want to lay stress on that word. The contextual usage is absolutely the same. Similarly for sun, but when I want to say specifically, I'll say the sun. So the article is added to denote specificity. On another note, if I use the before a vowel or a vowel sounding word, I'll pronounce it as the. The meaning does not change here. The remains the only. Specially also will denote the same context, but the only reason why we add it here is to lay stress on the word. Similar is the concept with among and amongst. Both mean, in fact we are just going to check the difference between among and between in the upcoming slides, then there will be more clarity to you. So usage is not very different, it's the same, so the context remains the same. Great, so I hope all of your doubts are clear. Please give me a thumbs up or a yes, no with whatever doubts that are left so that we can move ahead. Great, so all of you are on board. Anjani, will you please just wait for maybe a couple of slides more and put your question on board, and then we can always discuss it in our next break. Okay, material noun, Anjani. Okay, guys, just last 30-second interruption. Anjani, material noun. Let's go to the word. What does material say? Koi cheez, right? So material noun talk about anything that would lead to composition of a substance. For instance, wood. Wood could lead to composition of a table or a chair. Another material is silk, right? It could form silk sari, silk thread. Another is gold. It could form gold coin, jewelry. So material noun, basically any material, whether it's silk, wood, gold, silver. I hope it's clear now. Great. Let's move on to our next agenda, pronoun. So we talked about how pronouns are used in place of noun. We are going to do 6 different categories of pronoun and their usage. Now again a disclaimer, please hold on tight to your seats, listen very carefully because we are going to rush through a lot of very important rules. Please be attentive. Okay, the first is personal pronoun. Let's go back to the basic. When you say personal pronoun, you mean related to a person. Now there are 3 people, आप, मैं and the third person जो अभी यहाँ पे है नहीं, right? So again, first person, second person and the third person. So I would refer the first person as I or me, the second person as you, my dear audience, and the third person someone who's not here, he, she or they. We together, all of us are always treated as the first person. Now the rule here with the first person is that if any statement starts with an it is always followed by an I and not me. It is always followed by either a he and not him, and it is always followed by a she and not her. Let us look at a small example. It was me who broke the window. I hope this rule is clear to all of you. Sorry, my bad. It was I. It was me is the wrong statement. It will always be I, he or she. So Rahul is not taller than her. Rahul is taller than she. That brings us to the second rule of personal pronoun. Whenever there is a comparison, again we use I, he or she and not me, him or her. Okay, I'll repeat again. Personal pronoun. We talked about personal pronoun that it talks about three people. First person, second person and the third person. First person is I or me. Second person is you. And the third person is he, she or they. Third person being referred to as. Now there are two rules relating to personal pronoun. The first rule is whenever a statement starts with it is always followed by I, he or she and never me, him or her. These words are called as subjective pronoun, the list of which I will be giving to you in the next two slides. Then you can note down the list as it is. The second rule is whenever there is a comparison. Let's see an example of comparison. We just talked about how we can see comparison. Remember adjectives? We just talked about comparative degree. So I will say Ram is taller than she. How do we gauge the comparison? Because of the word taller. Remember in adjectives we always learned that there is comparison between two entities. It might sound a bit odd to you, but if you go back, look at your grammar basics book, you will definitely find these rules. It's just that there is a lot of gap between our spoken English and the actual grammatically correct English. That's why it might just sound a little odd. Great. I hope these two rules are clear of personal pronoun to all of you. Yes, Shraddha, whenever we use than, that makes it comparison. Yes, Hina, Ram is taller than she and not her. Moving on, the next is indefinite pronoun. Indefinite pronouns are a combination of every, some, any or no with buddy or one. So the words become everybody, somebody, anybody, nobody and everyone, someone, anyone and no one. With the comparison, I know some of you are having doubts. Be patient for another 5 minutes. We are going to move on to the slides of subjective pronoun and then you will have a whole list of words that has to be used, how and when, and a perfect clarity on that. Great. For indefinite pronoun, we just learned that they are a combination of these words everybody, everyone, somebody, someone, anybody, anyone, nobody, no one. What is the rule with it? All these words, the verb with them is always treated as singular. I repeat, with all the indefinite pronouns, the verb is always in the singular form. Hina, I'm going to come back to your question when we take a 2 to 3 minute break. Okay, why is it always treated as singular? Let's take a very small example of this. When we say that everybody, guys, please look at this example of indefinite pronoun. We say everybody is eating at the table. We never say everybody are eating at the table. So you see, with every indefinite pronoun, the verb used is in the singular form. So with eating, I have used is and not are. I hope this concept is clear to everybody. Moving on to reflexive pronoun. What are reflexive pronouns? Reflexive pronouns are the ones that always end with self or selves. Why are they called reflexive? Because the reflexive pronoun in these statements always calls back the subject. Let us take a small example of this. He did his homework himself. So you see how himself, the reflexive pronoun which is ending in self or selves, is pointing back again to the subject which is he. So these are called reflexive pronouns because they always point back at the subject, and the key here is that they always end with self or selves. Great. Moving on to the reciprocal pronoun. Reciprocation means aapas mein. Remember how when we write emails, at the end of the email we write kindly reciprocate back or kindly reciprocate to my email, which means that I'm expecting a reply, please reply back. So here are the words that talk about reciprocal pronoun or that reflect reciprocal pronoun. For instance, each other and one another. Now remember the key here, each other is always for two people and one another is for more than two people. We're just going to apply those concepts in a few questions. Again, between is for two people and among is for more than 2 people. As I said, some of you had asked me the question that the difference between among and amongst. Again, the usage is same, the context is same, the meaning is almost same. So I could say my friends were fighting among themselves, or my friends were fighting amongst themselves. Both would mean aapas mein. So for one another, again, because it's more than 2, I would say the 5 sisters were fighting with one another and not with each other, because again 5 sisters, right? So 5 people, which is more than 2, so they were fighting with one another and not with each other. Moving on to the distributive pronoun, they are called as distributive because they are in 2 parts of the sentence, either or, neither nor. What is the difference between 2? That either or is used in positive context and neither nor is used in negative context. Either or means या तो ये या फिर ये, neither nor means ना ही ये ना ही वो. So either Ram or Shyam will win the race, which means one of them is definitely going to win the race. Neither nor is negative, neither Ram nor Shyam will win the race, which means none of them are going to win the race. Moving on to the last one, relative pronoun. The difference between that and which is that talks about a direct relationship, whereas which talks about additionality, and that talks about a direct relationship. There is a tiny trick here. Whenever you have to fill in the blanks for that or which, if there is a comma before the blank, definitely it's going to be which and never that. Obviously, we just talked about how which talks about additionality, right? And whenever there is a comma, we are talking about additional information. So whenever a comma precedes a blank, it's always going to be which. Let's take a small example to put this into perspective. Yes, Ayush, you're right. They can be used as conjunctions. Ayush just asked us if the distributive pronouns can be used as conjunction or can be used to connect 2 different parts of speech. So yeah. Okay, let's take a tiny example to put that and which into perspective. If I say this is the letter, pardon me for my handwriting, this is the letter that was kept in the mailbox, comma, which broke yesterday. So you see how I'm using that and which in the same type of sentence, but that is telling me a direct relationship between the letter and the mailbox, whereas which is adding additional information about the mailbox in the sentence. So which is telling me that the mailbox broke yesterday. Yes, Shraddha, I'll just take up your doubt as soon as I finish pronouns. Could you please just wait for another 5 minutes? Ayush, we cannot always use that in place of which, because both of them have different usage. Even though both of them are relative pronoun, they are used to relate to things, but that tells me about direct relationship, whereas which is telling me about additional information. Hina, regarding the comma thing, I was just telling that here's a tiny trick to the comma, that whenever there is a comma, after the comma it is always which and never that. Obviously, let us put a tiny logic into it. Comma tells us additional information. For instance, I like A, comma B, comma C, comma D. So that is additional, right? Comma is telling me about additional information, that these are so many things that I like. So definitely after the comma it's going to be which, because as we just learned, which is talking about additionality. Quickly moving on to the pronoun types. Again, we just learned 6 different types of pronoun, and now we are moving on to the subject, verb, object rule. The rule is called SVO. Shraddha, please listen carefully. Now here we'll be clearing your doubt regarding she and her. So the rule here is that between the subject and the verb, we always have the subject pronoun, which is this, and between the verb and object, we always have the object pronoun. So I'm just moving a slide ahead to tell you about the list of subject and object pronoun. I'm going to give you half a minute to note it down, and then we are going to come back to the examples and put it into perspective. Possessive pronoun is an additional list here. Just take a couple of seconds to note it down and let me know once you're done, and I'll tell you what possessive pronouns are. We've just put it into table for convenience. but possessive pronouns run a little different from subjective and objective pronouns. Great. So you guys are done now. I hope you have the list in front of you, so you'll be able to put the examples into perspective in a better fashion. So we all know what the subject is. It is the doer. And what is the object? It is the sufferer of an action. So in the first example, I am going to the party tonight. So I will not say me am going to the party tonight, because this is the subject here. So I will be using the subjective pronoun only. But on the other hand, they is the subject, us is the object here. So I will use us and not we here. So you see the difference between subjective pronoun and objective pronoun. Okay, let us look at another comparative example. Here in the first part, I am talking about the subject, that all of us are the subject here. So I use we and not us. As you saw in the list, we is the subjective pronoun, but us is the objective pronoun. On the other hand, in a similarly comparative example, I'll use I as the subjective pronoun here, but on the other hand, other half, I'll use me, which is the objective pronoun. So you see, you have the subject, verb and object. Let us put it into perspective again here. This part is the subject, so I have used subjective pronoun. I have the verb here, accompanies the verb, and the rest half of the statement is object, the sufferer. So I have used objective pronoun here. I hope everybody is clear about how subject, verb, object rule works. Okay, some of you want me to show you the list again. Here it goes. Please quickly note it down. We have a lot of things to cover for today. Okay, Shraddha, coming back to your question we talked about. In the meanwhile, when everybody is noting down, let us talk about Shraddha's question. Shraddha is asking me again, when we talked about why is Ram taller than her and not taller than she. Shraddha, we talked about how in two specific exceptional cases, when you have comparison and when a statement is starting with it, you always follow it with the subjective pronoun and not the objective pronoun. So it will be I, he and she, and not him, her or me. So that were the two exceptions that we talked about. So taller is comparison. Remember, tall, taller, tallest. We studied the adjectives. How when an ER comes at the end of a verb, it means comparison between two things or two people. So we are putting the same rule of comparison from adjectives into our personal pronouns, saying that whenever there is a comparison, you always use the subject pronoun and not the object pronoun, even though it might sound correct. Okay, Khushi is asking me the difference between collective noun and indefinite pronoun. Khushi, let me take you back to the slides where we are talking about indefinite pronoun. So indefinite pronoun, we are using it for or instead of a group of people. Collective nouns are not just used for people, but they can be used for objects as well. Right? So collective noun, I will say things like a pack of cards or a herd of sheep or a school of fish, things like that, or a bunch of keys. But for a bunch of keys, I will never say everybody or everyone. So pronouns, indefinite pronouns are used for in perspective of people, anybody, anyone. I hope, Khushi, now you're clear about the difference between indefinite pronouns and collective nouns. Both of them are different categories. Yes, Vidushi, it would be Ram is taller than she. Okay, let's quickly move on to the next slide. Please note down your doubts and keep them on the side. We are going to devote an extra 5 minutes, whatever it is, whether it's the SVO role or if you have still not understood the difference between her and she, please keep some patience and note down your doubts on your notebook, and I'm going to discuss it in a little while. Let's first try and wrap up grammar as fast as we can. Okay, remember how we just learned about the SVO rule, the different type of pronouns. Let's quickly put it into perspective here. Let's see the first example. We just learned that with everybody. What was everybody? Let's move on to the slide here. Everybody was an indefinite pronoun, and we learned that with indefinite pronoun, the verb is always in the singular form, right? Everybody is eating at the table. So everybody accepts their responsibility would be wrong. Everybody accepts his/her responsibilities. Okay, moving on to the next question. If anyone are going. Same example, right? We just learned anybody, anyone is. Very good. Khushi, Aditya, Shraddha, Jobanpreet, you all are right. Okay, what about this example? The dog has its bone. Is it correct? Is it wrong? Yes, you guys are right. It's incorrect. It should be ITS, its. Let me take you to a tiny bit of concept here of possessive pronouns. So what do possessive pronouns tell us? They tell us about ownership, about possession. So the forms go mine, ours, your, yours, his, her, their, its. I hope you guys have noted down the table already. So there is no formula, there is no indicative word that how you can identify a possessive pronoun. You identify it only with the help of how the sentence comes into context. So if the context talks about possession or ownership, then you use the possessive pronoun. For instance, in this example, the dog has its bone. So I'm talking about the bone that belongs to the dog. So the dog has ownership of the bone. That is why we use its. And a little while back, I think Aditya had asked me a doubt between the apostrophe. Remember when I just gave you an example of girls? With an apostrophe, the apostrophe always denotes singular plus specific. If I say the girl's notebook, so I'm talking about the specific girls who owns that specific notebook. So it talks about singular plus specific. Here we don't need that. We are talking about ownership, that the dog owns the bone. Moving on to the next example, this is a correct one. Because if I talk about it, I'm talking about it plus is. It is a long way home, which is absolutely correct. Okay, Hina is asking me what is girls. So girls with an apostrophe after the S. So we use an apostrophe after the S when we are talking about plural plus specific. Now please listen to this example very carefully. Remember how we celebrate Children's Day, but we've always been writing wrong. I want you guys to simply write Happy Children's Day on your notebook, and I'm going to tell you what is the mistake that you guys make. I hope you guys have written it. Yes, the apostrophe comes after the S. Why? Because it's plural plus specific. Children, the word in itself is plural. So apostrophe before the S tells you singular plus specific, but apostrophe after the S tells you plural plus specific. Yes, you guys are right. Moving ahead, take the last example into perspective. We chose John and she for the committee. Quickly apply the SVO rule here. We becomes the subject. So we chose becomes the subject. So it is the subjective pronoun. Chose is also the verb here. So this part becomes the object. So do you think it should be she? Yes, all of you are right. It should be her. Let's move on to the next component of our today's lecture of grammar, prepositions. So prepositions link nouns or pronouns. They denote time, distance, direction, place, location, etc. We all know about this. The concept here is that one single pronoun can be used for different connotations. How? Let's make a tiny table. We have at and we have in. So let's take place and let's take location, or let's take time, right? So at denotes a smaller place and in denotes a bigger place. Please keep up because I'm quickly going to discuss these examples and tell you why I've made this chart. Time, at tells me a specific time, whereas in tells me a non-specific time. Great. Let's put this into perspective. The train is due at 12:15 p.m. But if I say she came to my house in the morning, I will not say she came to my house at the morning. So in you see tells me non-specific time in the morning. But if I talk about a specific time, I'll use at. Okay, let's talk about the place. If I say he lives at 221B Baker Street in London. So the smaller place, 221B Baker Street, I've used an at for it, but for London I've used in. Yes, Hina, that's what I'm trying to explain, that one single preposition can be used in certain contexts. If you guys do logical reasoning questions on directions, that he turned southwest for 50 meters, then towards north, then towards west, that's also the places where we use in to denote direction. So one single preposition can be used at multiple places. I'm just taking a small example to explain this to you. Now let's do a few more examples. So we've seen that there is at, my brother is coming on Monday. I'm using on to again denote Monday. We're having a party on the 4th of July. She likes to jog in the morning. Right? We just talked about how in tells about non-specific time. And the last one, it's too cold in winter to run outside. Sorry, not this one. Okay, Hina, the question that you've asked that why do we write by her watch? We use this as a phrase, right? So phrases are the words that do not have like a literal context. So if I tell you that it's raining cats and dogs, it does not mean ki aasman se sach mein kutte billi baras rahe. It would just mean that it's just raining heavily. Similarly, there's a difference between she came by my house and she came over my house, which are actually phrases. So if somebody comes by my house, it means they have visited. But if I say that somebody came over my house, it means they came and stayed. Okay, regarding your questions with prepositions, guys, please hold on. I told you we will take tiny breaks in between where I will discuss questions. Kindly note down your examples and keep them. We are really short on time and I want to complete the text we just decided for today as soon as possible. But I will definitely take up your doubts. The next one is conjunction. So we talked about how conjunctions are used to connect different clauses, sentences or parts of speech. Okay, so the thing here is that people often think that conjunctions can be used only in the middle of the sentence, but it's not correct. Conjunctions can be used even at the starting. For instance, I can start my sentence by although, and I think, but someone pointed out how the distributive pronouns can also be used as conjunctions, and we talked about it that yes, distributive pronouns can be used as conjunctions, and you see an example here how we are using either Santa or Banta could get promoted. Similarly, Reena wanted not only fame and riches but also love. Now let us look at a couple of conjunction pairs. I'm going to give you guys a couple of minutes. Let's take about 30 seconds, quickly note down these conjunction pairs which always exist together. So we have seen examples for most of these. We just saw an example for not only but also, either or, neither nor we had already seen, whether you want A or you want B. So this is also done. As long as, I hope you guys are done. Let's move on. Perfect. Okay. Now we are almost moving towards the end of grammar and trying to do confusing words and how they coexist. Remember, towards the middle of the slides, I promised you that we would be doing elaborate examples on difference between, among and between. So here it is. Couple of questions for you. We are just going to do one or two and then I'm going to give you guys some time to practice those. So maths and English, I prefer to study math. What do you guys think should be the first one? Yes, between it is. How do you guys gauge it? Because we are talking about two entities. Remember, we talked about how between is for two and among is for more than two. So we have two entities, maths and English, 1 and 2. So between is the correct answer. Moving on, the next one, among, between all of the many animals. Perfect. It would be among because we are talking about all of the many, which means it is obviously more than 2. Let's look at example number 3. The 5 sisters love. Yep, one another it is, because 5 sisters, more than 2. The 2 brothers fought with, yes, each other. Because again, 2 brothers, right? Each other is for 2. Moving on to the next set of confusing words, beside and besides. So the difference between beside and besides is, beside means next to, let's say to put it into simpler words, bagal mein, and besides means in addition to, matlab iske alawa. So what I want to say here in this example is that besides going to the grocery shop, Jim needs to do some clothes shopping today, which means that apart from going to the grocery shop, Jim also has some other work, which means in addition to. But if I want to say that the table lamp is placed dash the bed, I will use beside because I want to say that the table lamp is placed next to the bed. Moving on to the next set, Okay, so the difference between lay and lie is usually a very confusing word. I'm going to put it into a very simple perspective for you guys. Lay means bichhana and lie means letna. Lie also means to be untruthful, but here lie means letna and lay means bichhana. So remember, हम किसी इंसान को बिछा नहीं सकते हैं. So a human would always lie down. But if I have to spread books, as in the next example, I will lay the books. So the first one, lie, is the correct one. The next is lay. I hope this is clear to you. The difference between lay and lie. Great. Moving on, the difference between as and like. As means a direct relationship and like means similarity. So in this example, I want to say that the students thought that the professor was acting similar to a child. So the correct answer would be like. But when I'm talking about a direct relationship, I want to use as. That's why in this example where I want to say that she worked as a waitress, the correct answer is as and not like, because I'm talking about a direct relationship and not about a similarity. The last one is very simple. Let's do the last one. Okay, remember, the polygon has multiple sides, but the polygon is a single entity. But there is a tiny confusion here. Most of you are confused. No, my dear friends, we are not going to consider a polygon as multiple. It's not plural. The polygon is a single entity, right? Even though it has multiple sides, but in itself it's one single entity, one single geometric figure. Moving on to the quantifiers, the ones that tell us about a quantity, few, many and number. They are countable, but some, much, more, amount, little are uncountable. Let's take a few examples of this. So if I have to talk about French fries, I will say few. Obviously, when your friends are eating French fries out of your plates, you definitely count them. But if I say mashed potato, you cannot count mashed potatoes. You will say some mashed potato, but few French fries. Again, you would want some water, but few glasses of water, because you can count the glasses of water, but you cannot count water. I hope this concept is clear to everybody, and you guys have noted down the list of quantifiers. The countable ones are few, many and number, but the uncountable ones are some, much, more, amount and little. So I want little water, I don't want many water. Moving on, let's practice a few questions on this. Let's do the first one. Yes, the answer here is some. We cannot count wine. Although we can count glasses of wine, but that's not the context here. So some is the correct answer. Let's do the second one. Yes, you cannot count information, but if it were pieces of information, you could have counted it. But the correct answer here is some. Let's do the last one. The first blank is many. Obviously, we can count the number of students, right? What do you guys think about the second blank? Yes, a few. Again, because you can count the number of students. Moving on to articles. So we know articles are the, a, and an. Regarding the usage, articles are usually used to replace the use of one. In this case, when we use the, we are talking about specific, something specific. The sun or the company, we are referring to something very specific. But when we say a, we are usually talking about singular plus general, whereas the is singular plus specific. And is also used for a singular object, but and is used when we are trying to or whenever we have the sound of a vowel. Remember, my dear friends, it is the sound of the vowel and not just the vowel in itself. For instance, even though you say the word honest starts with an H, the pronunciation is with the sound of O. That's why you say an honest man. Let us look some of these examples. What do you guys think would fit in the first one? Many of us resisted separating dash glass, cans and paper out of our garbage. Remember, the talks about specificity, a talks about general. Yes, most of you are correct. We are going to use the, because I have identified and specifically told that I am separating these three things. What about the second one? Remember, the word is pronounced as hassle. Yes, what a hassle. There is no pronunciation of a vowel. It starts with the sound of an H. Sorry, a H, my bad. So, a hassle. Hassle, the word hassle means problem. I have not defined any specific type of problem, so I will not use the word the here. I'm generally talking about a problem. Also, it does not start with the sound of a vowel. So, a. Let's move on to the third example. Mehak, regarding the first example, I am talking about specific elements of the garbage. The garbage may have more than these elements. It may have not just glass cans and paper, it may have other things like vegetable peels or anything else. But I'm specifically talking about three things. That's why I've used the here. So the correct answer here is catches a cold, because singular but general, that turns into a sinus infection. General, right? I'm not talking about, even though these, okay, remember, cold and sinus infection is a condition. It is not a specific type of disease. But if I say someone has type A diabetes, I'm specifically talking about type A diabetes. Then I could add the, that person A has the type A of diabetes, but cold and sinus infection is a condition. Remember, it's not a specific disease. Moving on to the last example, physicians are quick to blame. Very good. Yes, the public, because I'm referring to the people as a singular specific entity. Please, if you have any more doubts, do not hesitate to email us or post it on our HitBullsEye official website. We will be there 24/7 to reply to your emails and queries as soon as possible. So until the time we meet next, have a good day and good night.